folks. It's the mediocre cover band guitar guy. Or maybe I should change it to the creepy cover band guitar guy. I don't know. So it's Saturday again, and here I am talking at you about cover band stuff. A little bit of Led Zeppelin there, poorly played. Rolled out of bed and did it as usual. But that's today's lesson, boys and girls. We're going to talk about band communication, and sometimes communication breaks down, and that's one of the things that kills a lot of bands. So, the first myth I'm going to clear up about being in any type of band is that a band is always its own little democracy. Sometimes it's not democratic, folks. Sometimes you might win the vote, but you might have to give in on a decision that you're not happy with because it's the better for the band and could make the difference, make or break sort of situation for your band, if you will. It's not always going to be even whether it's you're voting on a song in your set list or a gig or whatever, or kicking somebody out. It might not be something that you're happy with or even comfortable with, but end up having to do anyway. And that's something that you're going to have to, if you want your band to work, you're going to have to swallow your pride a little bit and go with, if it's for the better of the band. And sometimes you might have to stick your foot down and refuse to do something because it's not for the better of the band. It's something that's going to impact you getting gigs, your reputation, whatever. And as I said, there are things, you got your set list. It could be something as simple as a song you don't want to play. That one happens to me a lot because there's a lot of stuff I don't want to play, but I get voted out and then I have to learn and play it. And sometimes it's, once again, it's one of your bar beaters like Wagon Wheel or Brown Eyed Girl or Keep Your Hands to Yourself or something. And you end up having to swallow it and play it. Sometimes you've got people in your band that aren't pulling their weight. They're missing gigs all the time. They're missing rehearsals all the time. And they're just not toeing the line and they're getting paid the same as you or expect to be paid the same as you, and then you're putting in your work and they're not. And you have to make a decision, and sometimes it might be your friend and you don't want that person to go, and if you're in a four-piece, it could end up being 2 against 1, 3 against 1 if you're in a 5-piece. Sometimes it's, and it's hard. In that situation, there's probably never a tie because the person getting kicked out is never usually aware that it's coming. If they're not graceful enough to step back on their own, if they don't have time to sort of put into it. That's a big one. Sometimes it could be on a gig that you don't want to play. It could be a bar you had a bad incident in, a bar that brings back bad memories or whatever, or a venue, something not so good, something you don't want to do, something that's not favorable for yourself. You might have to suck it up for your band's sake and your reputation and your gigs, because if it's a high profile gig, then that can also lead to more work down the road. So always keep that in the back of mind, but try to keep it as democratic as you can when you're doing this this type of stuff. It's not as sore then because you figure if I'm voted out 3-1, then I'll usually say, well, okay, it's just a matter of me and my opinion again, being a sook. And I got voted out, so the other 3 must think that there's something to it for a reason, and I'll usually go along with it. It's very rarely I'll refuse to do anything anyway. I'm usually on board for stuff. But there is a rare occasion where I might have to say, no, you know what, I'm not doing it. You guys are going to have to do it without me, and usually it results in us not wanting to do it. Another thing I'm going to talk about today, sort of in your cover band thing, because people think it's just taking 4 of your friends and putting it together, and that's one of the things I want to talk about is you got to be careful when you're bringing friends into your band. It's great when you're a teenager because everybody's cohesive, you like the same things, and you're hanging out all the time, and it's like you finish rehearsing and then you go off somewhere and you talk about how great your band is. When you're like myself and you're 48 years old and you've been doing this since you were 16 years old, bringing friends really close, you'll become friends with your bandmates along the way in most cases, 90% of the time. But if you're bringing a friend in and they're not friends with everybody else, you can guarantee if that person's not carrying their load, there's where your votes come in to boot them. And that can cause friction in your friendship. And if you've got 4 or 5 lifelong friends and that becomes the case, it's the same thing. So you might want to be careful about doing that, especially if you're placing ads, because we went through this, and I remember a few years ago we put out ads and looking for a bassist, and we found one on Kijiji who bought a drummer along. That was the first lineup of the Urban Legends. A few months later, a friend of ours had put up a post and said, just looking for a suggestion, what's the best way to find band members? They were looking for a drummer. And one of us, myself or Tammy, had commented that we'd been successful with the Kijiji ad, and a person came back and said, no, don't go and do that. Hire one of your friends. It's better when you have your friends in the band, but it's not always better when you have your friends in the band. If something happens that causes friction between you and that person, sometimes it spills out over the band, like it spills out afterwards, after rehearsal, after a show. And that's one of the things that Tammy and I have often talked about, us being together as partners, as a couple. We rehearse in this room here in our home, and when everybody else goes home, if 2 of us have a disagreement on something, it doesn't end there sometimes. It can spill over. So you really have, it's not even I'm not even saying you got to walk on eggshells or anything like that, but you have to keep communication open, and you have to learn to talk directly, and you have to learn to sort of say it in a calm manner instead of blowing everything out of proportion and screaming and yelling and throwing shit around and hauling cables out of your amp, or oh, I'm the boss or whatever. You have to keep the lines of communication open. One little piece of advice I can give you, though, to save a little bit of screwing around with when you're looking to book or make decisions for your band, you need to have a skipper. I played in Two Guitars Clash and Hardliner with Doug Rowe, and I've always said about Doug is that he ran a tight ship, and he was the skipper. There was no questions about it. Whatever he told me to do, I would do it without complaining, because he was the boss and he took responsibility. If something went wrong, he took responsibility. If it went right, he took the credit, but he deserved it. You really need to put somebody in charge of what you're doing, because then that way somebody can keep track of what you're booking, what you're doing, whether it's promoting the band or whatever, especially with the booking, because if you're looking at booking gigs, and if I'm doing it, Tammy's doing it, Perry and Alex are coming in, so-and-so wants to book us. I said sure, and then it's like, well, if you look at the calendar, I couldn't play on that date. If you look at the calendar, we're already booked on that date. So at least if one person's doing that, they've got access to everything you're doing, and you don't get double booked and overbooked or whatever you want to call it. So that's that sums it up there for me today. That's a quick one. Just a little bit of advice on your band and your democracy and communication. Because if you don't, things will fester. It's like any relationship. You got good moments, you got bad moments, you got things you want to do, things you don't want to do, and you don't always want to be around your bandmates sometimes. Sometimes they say something, and sometimes they don't mean anything by it, which is always a good reason to keep your communication open. So I'm going to call it a day. Enjoy the rest of my Saturday. We got some plans. I'm going to probably later on today drink some beverages of a delicious nature. So everybody stay safe. Tune in to anybody who's doing a Facebook Live. Support those people. Downtown's got some acoustic acts going on down there now. So if you're down around there, pop in, have a drink, and support those people. Can't stress it enough. Live venues were in trouble before all this happened, and it's probably going to be a while before it gets back to normal, as we're seeing. So supporting these people that are up there now, singing their hearts out, their acoustics and stuff, supporting them is really big right now, because they're the stepping stone for everybody else to kind of, they're doing the heavy lifting right now for the rest of us to get back to a norm. So speaking for myself, I appreciate it, and I hope you guys all have great gigs. And good luck. Have fun. Stay safe.